had before. Ease of attendance, i.e. you didn't need to leave your desk, you didn't need to leave your office, you didn't have to add on that extra 20 minutes or an hour of transit back and forth. So I would recommend that we do it again that way and not try to do it in person. It has nothing to do with the cost savings, although that plays a role in it, but it really has to do with the increased attendance. And since people have become very used to using chat and therefore communicating back and forth that way, you even got people who might well be reluctant to stand up in a room and ask a question, to participate really in a timely manner and to be able to respond back. And now you have not only the list of those who participated, and you can communicate with them again for whatever purpose, but you also have a list of those who were really interested, because the people who asked the questions were those who had high interest. So to the extent that we ever want to send out a newsletter as to what we're up to or what we're doing, heaven forbid you should have time to do that. But if we ever want to do that, these people, that list becomes integral to our ability to communicate outward. So I thought it was substantively wonderful. I thought it was procedurally incredible. So
we were supposed to have 5 agencies at the panel discussion, and we were running out of time at the time that the panel discussion started, and 3 of the agencies had dropped off for various reasons, but they all expressed an interest in participating next year. They all said that they would like to be part of it again next year.
So I think you have something to build on. So that's really wonderful. Jean, you should be personally commended.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start that point for old business. Now we can go to new business, subsection 4, A, New York City Council Committee hearing testimony.
Yeah, so about a week or so ago, we testified before the city council. It was the Committee on Civil and Human Rights. Natasha Williams, the chair of the committee, was the person that was the point person on that particular committee. And the topic of the committee dealt with COVID and the impact of COVID on the city's workforce. At the time of the time that we were meant to provide testimony, we didn't really have a full understanding of what the chair was looking for. So we basically spoke about the impact of COVID on our own workforce, not on the city's workforce per se. But having said that, we expect to go back and possibly address the issue in a different setting, so that we can get answers back to the chair of the committee, more on point to what she was looking for.
So you have a better sense she's looking for, or do you think that will benefit from scheduling a meeting or debriefing with her herself?
So yes, I think that we would definitely need to have another meeting with the chair, just to be sure that we're on the right track. But I think we have a much better idea of what she was looking for. She's looking for data around what happened with the city's workforce. Did COVID, the impacts of long haul COVID, the impacts of COVID on separations, on hires, to the extent that there was any kind of impact.
Why can't you use the list we were just talking about of attendees and ask them some distinct questions and see what response you get back from them? my assumption is that they're highly likely to respond to you.
Yes.
Because of their interest, and you sort of, I mean, it's not, it really isn't a scientific study, and I understand that it's clearly limited, but you could get responses back which would give you some sense about long haul and some sense about its impact on their ability to function.
And I think if we did do such a survey, if we created a survey for the agencies, I would like to make sure the chair of the committee is happy with the questions and getting
Exactly.
answers.
But that's what I mean, you really have a sort of a listserv, for want of a better term, that you could use.
Do you need to limit, can you limit the extent of the agencies that you will participate with? Like if you have better collaboration with 5, can you do a study of how COVID impacted those 5 agencies? And then, based on those results, expand it to
I think they're too dissimilar.
No, that I understand, but it's better to have a study based on good data than sending a report to a bunch of agencies that 60% may not participate because they don't, the others send you halfway data, the others whatever, and you just say, we studied these 5 agencies, and this is what the results were. I don't know, I'm asking the question if it's.
And it's something that we could possibly raise with the chair of the committee and see
Okay.
if that's something that she'd be interested in.
Okay. That's a good thought.
And in addition to what both commissioners have suggested, the current data that you already collect, through the audits, whether through having that data set for past reports like on separations or retirement, there's always a value with just looking at that data, compliance and audits and everything. 4 years before COVID. Now we're going to 2 years in COVID or 8 years into COVID, 1 year out of COVID, whatever. And seeing if anything jumps out in those numbers that really might have a, pre and post, effect to it in terms of COVID, anything that's happened. So that might be one way to see if anything jumps out.
That's a great idea.
Separation, retirement, and then that'll give us a sense to dig deeper, which may be the pretext to a local law 13 feature report that chair of the city council's commission feel that she has more investment in or ordinance for community because it comes directly out of the interest that was mentioned in the hearing.
But even as to retirement, assuming you have a greater share of retirement among the police department for one, that may have totally other reasons for having their extra retirement. May well be the new police commissioner as opposed to anything related to COVID. So the data itself is not going to.
Yeah, but we don't.
I mean, we don't know, but that's a piece of it.
Yeah.
That's
Or it may be.
and coupled with the fact that you also have an increased limitation on budget. So whether that increases, I mean, that's another variable that may show you with increased retirements, wanting to get out now rather than having less people reporting to you. I mean,
Yeah,
there,
we don't
know. I mean, we just don't know. The problem with the data, I'm afraid, going back 4 years and going, is that there are lots of other things that are totally unrelated to COVID, so that the analysis is
It's anachronistic, absolutely. But if it's happening in NYPD, it's happening in DOE, if it's happening in PPC, if it's happening in DOT, it's happening in anything NYCHA, then you might think there's something more here. So then you start creating a narrative that we back into a kind of causation claim. But it's definitely not something that you begin with the causality. You begin with what the data looks like.
And a lot of agencies do conduct exit interviews with their employees. So that's something that we might be able to get a handle.
Yeah, that's beyond the scope of this meeting, but that's interesting. Exit interviews. I wonder whatever happens to them.
Right.
That's
Probably
I
going
think
to
we're more
fascinating.
my age.
Yeah. But I wonder if there's like, a Is there a database that they go into or they scan? Is it?
In our,
No,
what we do in our agency is the exit interviews goes to the HR department that scan them, puts them in folders, and in my case, I ask to see them because I want to understand, why the separation or whatever, and what can I do to improve practices? Because one of the questions is always, what would you do
right.
or what could we have done to retain you in the agency? And people share their hearts. So that, I think it's one of the most informative pieces of information for the money.
But I don't think it's codified anywhere because it really is disparate. I mean, the reason that someone may leave one skilled job may be totally different
Yeah.
than someone leaving another skilled job.
Yeah.
They may be leaving because they got an offer of better pay that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the agency or whatever.
Yeah.
They may be leaving because can't get used to their new manager.
Yeah.
That's a different management issue. And you've got to deal with it as a management issue, but where would you codify them? You can't really put them in,
No,
What do you mean by codified?
so that you keep reasons for separation, extra pay, management skill,
Okay.
And I think those are so personal that you don't codify them.
yeah, no,
But normally, if you see it, what I've seen in my, is that when you see it in the context of departments, then it helps you understand what areas to improve.
Right,
Because if you see a lot of separations from the same department, they normally will tell you what is happening. If it is money, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so we need to talk about increasing salary budgets. And because your people are not coming to the agency and many are leaving. So it gives you some sort of understanding. So with the directors, we take the information and pass it to the directors. So they get to see the feedback that was left behind from, and many of them are super nice because I'm going to grad school,
Right.
we're rooting for you. Of course, we want you to go. A lot of people get promotions that we cannot do. So in many instances are positives. In some instances, you see patterns, and those patterns are the ones that directors should know.
I think that's hugely valuable.
Yes, they are.
And to the extent that exit interviews can be as valuable to others as they get to you as an executive, in the EPC mandate of looking at employment practices, procedures, recommendations, and legislative, suggestions of different things like that. I think that's an area where we could probably look further into in terms of how can this might be out there, it's disparate, not everybody's uniformly using it the same way, but imagine a scenario where one group of people might be leaving because of childcare issues.
Yeah.
And another group might be leaving because of more money, and there might be a gender.
I just have an EEPC directed question, so we normally do not look at each personnel record.
Yeah.
That is not something that we look at or have looked at. And I just raised the question of whether or not we even have the authority to do
Yeah,
that.
no, I think you misunderstand.
But then we won't know.
Not individual. I'm talking about a recommendation to the largest city in the country to systematize and have a thoughtful, robust monitoring system, anonymized, really private, confidential, anonymized database where we just get a sense of why people leave city employment. It's a fair question, and it's perfectly within the purview of the EPC to not only care about how people get hired, but there's equity, equality, diversity.
So to take it to the next step, we would then be asking all the city agent EO officers to create, or we create a analytical tool under which they would place the number of people who have told them they're leaving for better pay. They would place under that the number of people that have told them they're leaving for a better promotion. They would base the number of people that have transferred to another agency because of X, Y, or Z. So we would create the tool that they would all use, because otherwise, how do you get to data? You can't get to data until someone inputs it. How would they input it? And it can't be one where we're looking at Max's file because we don't want to look at Max's file. We just want to know why Max told Jane he was leaving.
Yeah, this was not on the agenda. This is one of those aha moments. Thank Commissioner Alcantara for getting the practical application of it. But again, I mean, it's something that EPC, as a recommendation, we could probably look at. We're far from making that. There's a lot of due diligence, a lot of research, a lot of study we have to do. But to the extent that we do anything, it would be from the point of view, kind of what Commissioner Reese says, that, you know, the largest city in the United States with this kind of mandate or commitment, then would have to have, in all seriousness, a budget, you know, maybe consultants around this, a particular database app or training, you know, or however it makes sense. But we're far from that. But I just think it's fascinating as well. I've always heard of these activities to use.
We could do an audit based on two different things. We could do an audit based on separation and an audit based on promotion. And you could do them together at the same time so that you would know, it's almost the same part of the selection process. Why people leave and why some people are promoted and others are not. And then how many people leave because they weren't promoted. It really is integral.
It's fascinating. And one of the reasons that the EPC is not in a position to do these things is that we're short budgeted, short on staff, resources, right? But these are this is an example of the kind of things we could and would be able to do. That's critically important, I'm sure, for legislators and city agencies and such. And I think it's a real area for the EPC in particular to make a valuable contribution.
And there are things I learned yesterday, I didn't know that the system worked like that. That in civil service jobs, you need to apply for a promotion. And there are people that don't know that they need to apply for promotions. Because I heard the case of this person that was complaining that she never got promoted. And then when they went and verified the records, she had never applied for a promotion. And then when they told her, she's like, what do you mean? This is something that my boss will recognize me. And they were like, yeah, but if you didn't want to get promoted. So it was so interesting to me because I didn't know that I needed to apply for a promotion. I have never been part of civil service. So I always was promoted and it came from my boss. So I never thought that in civil service, and I'm wondering, even that this lady didn't know if there were other people that were in the same boat that even know the process that I have to go through these type of things, which is interesting in the labor force.
Well, part of the audit that we are currently conducting, the employment practices audit, we look to see if there's a career counselor who is supposed to advise employees about things like available tests, promotional exams, different job requirements, different training opportunities, to basically be a source of support for employees, especially people who are new to the civil service world. So that is part of the audit that we're currently doing to ensure that they do have a career counselor. The specifics of what the exact advice, we really can't get into. We don't have the resources to look that deep. But we are definitely making a note of whether or not that opportunity is available.
Authorities.
Agencies, yes. Yes.
But the next part of it is in promotion, often, and you have to take an exam in civil service for the next grade. So and the real problem is if the unit is not giving those exams. And so CUNY has had a delay in giving the exams. And so the unions sued CUNY for the delay, saying these exams have to be given. And so part of it within the civil service world, if I want to go from being an executive to being a supervisor, I've got to take the exam to become a supervisor.
And the exam is provided always by CUNY or each?
No, CUNY, this is just CUNY,
Oh, the
CUNY
CUNY.
is an entity.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just using it as an example.
Okay.
For the city
But I'm just
entities,
saying that in fact,
Yeah.
certainly in the world of civil service, most civil service employees, I would argue, know that part of the promotion track requires me to take an exam so that I am able to be on the list and be part of the top 3 that get,
Yeah.
we've been through that.
Okay.
the city is the same
DCAS.
with DCAS. DCAS does it. And they also try to, they release the lists of whatever tests are going to be offered the coming months. They offer, I think, like on a monthly, Civil Service 101 for people to come, and they ask that agencies distribute that kind of information to your employees. And for things like promotions where the tests are not given as frequently, they really try to make sure that agency, EO, HR, personnel officers, what have you, are made aware of those exams so that if they have applicable type people in the applicable lower titles, that they're alerting their employees, this test is coming up, this is your opportunity to take it, because it may be a while before it's given again.
And then it leads to some of the transfers. So
Mhm.
our looking at promotions and separations is complicated because lots of people take their new title and try to find an opening in another agency.
Yeah.
Not for any particular reason of not liking their home agency, but there aren't any promotions available here and there are promotions available there. So if I want to go and take it, it's so that I am entitled to the added benefits, added salary, added whatever.
But two things. When the employees look for, take the test, do they take them in their home agencies or do they have to go somewhere else?
It's a centralized DCAS test
Okay.
with
so
a
they
centralized
need to-
DCAS list.
And people get paid, do you have to take time off to go and do that or?
They're usually held on the weekends, the times that I've taken civil service exams, they're
And they
usually,
cost money.
yes, they do.
So
They
you
do.
have to pay to take
You
it.
pay for it.
You.
That's for
personally?
any exam, and the the fee for each exam is based on the pay rate of the actual title. So if the pay rate has a title, if the title has a pay rate, range, excuse me, of this to this, then the exam fee will be this amount. If it has a range from this to this, then the fee will be this amount, which is higher to correlate with the higher salary.
Then the other thing, Elaine, that I wanted to say, when I used to work at the University of Illinois, at the College of Engineering. And we always look at the students that came in, women, I was part of the women in engineering work. We lost a lot of women that drop out. And we studied them every single year to understand, where they're going, what are they doing, and why they're leaving the college. And we categorize them in two different things. One is the ones that go from, civil to mechanical. That's, you're still in the College of Engineering, that's okay with us. The ones that were somewhat problematic were the ones that went from Illinois, from engineering, and then now I discovered I want to be a nurse. So I went, they're still within, getting college degrees, and that's something that we will be proud of. Our main concern was the ones that completely dropped out, because why is that happening? And the ones that also transferred out of engineering, because somebody that is a nurse or that went to nurse may have been that she discovered her true passion, but for us it was, hold on, we do biological engineering. She could have stayed and get, sort of the same, and then you study that way. So within our case, those issues of promotion, if the promotions people stay within city government, we know that is an issue of opportunity. The issue is when I take my promotion and I decide to go and work in the private sector, and I think that would be what concerns us, right? Because we are training people for doing everything in our power to get these people to be proud of our jobs, and then we lose them to the private sector. What is it that we're not offering? And I think that we shouldn't concern about the ones that transfer among city, because they're still city people. It is when they go somewhere else that we should look into.
Agreed, except that back to the management issue. So if you discover that a whole batch of a particular ethnic group is leaving one entity and going elsewhere, then that should signal there may be an issue of discrimination within that. So I agree with you, except there may be some pieces that we discovered that we would not have discovered if we weren't looking at transfers. I mean, that may lead us back to the issue of why there are not more Hispanics in X agency or more Asians in Y agency.
Now the question is to people, I've seen the exit interviews that I've seen. I don't see people focusing on racial issues. Do you think that people will hit their exit interviews saying, they discriminate against women, that's why I'm leaving?
Yes.
You'll find that.
That's why that's what a lot of companies do, and that's what in my prior offices, they look at those exit interviews to see if there's any EEO issues.
Because presumably there's.
That's where you find it. That's where you'll find sexual harassment.
Presumably there's a high level of
I didn't-
forthrightness, right?
Yeah,
Exactly, because they're exiting, so
exactly.
that's their time.
They have nothing to lose now. They don't have to lose their job.
Yeah.
Retaliation.
But what about the you don't want to burn your bridges thing?
There's some of that too.
Do people worry about if I say these may follow me? Seriously, because I know.
I mean, the data may not be, the data is one data point, there may be
Yeah.
some of that, it may be reliability and validity issues.
Yeah.
They may not want to tell you the truth about Jim.
No, I'm thinking about, like all the cases that you see on TV of these, mega sexual harassment or whatever. It isn't until a mass group of women find each other.
Right.
And then you realize, but I'm not alone. It happened to you. And to you, what? Then they empower themselves to go and do it.
Exactly right.
But for years, people leave and you're like, my goal is to be executive director. If I complain now, how do I know that this HR person doesn't know the next HR? And I know that it's paranoia. But for those of us, for instance, that are in areas that are populated by men, with me it was always, no, even when they told me, you should complain, yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Because the other women will be like, oh no, if you do that, you're gonna. And it's awful because now I look back and I'm like, in that instance, I should have complained. In that one, maybe, I always let it go, afraid that it would follow you. So I wonder how many other women or minorities found themselves in the same, possibility, because in many, many instances, and I have many friends that have gone through the same, that other people in the office tell you, you don't want to go there. You're gonna damage your
You're
career.
probably right, but we can only deal with what we actually find.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
so to the extent that we see something that looks a little strange, if there are, let's just assume for a minute from your story that there's a multiplicity of women that leave from this one entity. There must be something going on. So then you ask other questions.
That's true.
But short of that, we can't create
Yeah,
data that
speculate.
doesn't exist.
Yeah, you're right.
So if we can go to now, it's a related point, right? The establishment of an advisory committee.
Yes, and I think that, the establishment of an advisory committee may help us to, if we work with other agencies within city government. I think it might help us in terms of, getting data, in terms of working through issues, identifying issues in city government. These other agencies that have things that they want to share, getting recommendations, because they are boots on the ground too, and they can see what's going on. So my request for this particular agenda item would be to ask if there would be any objection on behalf of the commission rather, to forming an advisory committee for matters of public.
Something, I realized what was bothering me about your letter, so let me just tell you. There's nothing, your letter makes it appear as though the EEPC is part of it's like the other city agencies, and we're not. We're, quote, an independent entity. And at some point, the letter should say that. And what we're trying to do is to form an advisory committee with the city agencies, a different animal. I'm assuming that the agencies that you're looking at DCAS among others, and human rights,
Yes.
and those are the two.
Those are the two right now, but I also foresee maybe CUNY, the community colleges, because we have to deal with them as
Well,
well.
I sit on something, I'm chair of the CUNY Civil Service Commission, that is, it is conceivable that that may be some place where you want to interact, or maybe you want to interact with the board itself. I don't know the answer to the question.
How do you select, how do you, what are the characteristics of the members that you're looking for this group?
So it would be entities that deals with employment matters. So, so we can form this expert brain trust, so to speak, so that the people, agencies that are familiar with with various employment issues, that have access to data, that have ideas, that can help us with the surveys.
So the invitation is to the commissioner or to specific persons within those agencies that you're describing?
Okay.
So I would make the invitation to the commissioner and can delegate.
Okay.
Two of those are mayoral agencies, correct?
Yes.
This is, you can tell me whether you agree or disagree. How about you have somebody from the city council as well? Because to the extent that you are an independent agency, we should have, and we are appointed by the mayor and the city council, and the chair is cross-appointed. You probably want someone from the city council coming in as well as part of your advisory committee. I don't know what subgroup that is or whatever, but it seems to me that creates the balance that was troubling me.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. But the city council is only the city council, they don't have any agents.
They have a couple, but they have committees.
Committees.
Oh.
So what you do is you put a member of what the particular human resource committee on it. And then and then what you're doing with the two mayoral agencies are the agencies again that are dealing with human resource. So that's what DCAS is doing, and that's what Human Rights is doing.
So how many committees in city council?
There's a lot.
I think last count there was like 26. I
Okay.
think there may be more.
But we can invite someone from the committee on women and gender equity.
Yeah.
And of course.
Women and minorities, isn't that what it's called? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, it's just.
That's a good point. Very fun.
What you're really looking at is input. And for you as an independent entity, you're looking for input from the other groups that also are dealing with the same issues we are dealing with. I think that Jean, I'd rework it to make that the focus. Sorry, it just, something troubled me about it. Not the concept, but the focus.
Anything else on?
Yeah, just a question. So as, we finalize the letter and we start to have our first meeting, is this something that our commission would be on?
Yes, I believe this is consistent with conversation we had, if not in the last commission meeting, the previous one. To me. Or it might have gone back even further, you were mentioning the charter said that we can advisory committee. Really haven't availed ourselves of that. We wanted to, yeah.
But again, based on, the fact we're independent, we're looking for input from the other groups that have the concern about the workforce as their function.
So we're concluding section 4 new business. Prior to concluding, the two things I want to know about. The city council, have they forwarded resumes to check on conflicts of interest and protecting potential candidates?
Yes, they have.
They forwarded them?
They forwarded 2. We reviewed them and sent them back, but that was at least a month ago.
Yes.
And in relation to kind of the discussion we were having today, I think at the close of business day today, the sanitation department, has held a very widely publicized and marketed recruitment campaign to get people to register for the civil service exam.
Right.
And it was the first time since 2016 or 14. Apparently last time, numbers might be wrong, but they had like 190,000. I find that's so hard to imagine.
It was-
That is true.
Yes,
Which is insane, like, when you multiply that by the patients.
for sanitation.
190,000, imagine it. And then usually, that's a list that kind of, becomes availability, right, by definition, or one of them. That's like Steve's or census, whatever, and then us as the EPC might, use that or learn about that. Maybe in 2025, 2026, when we're doing a report and we're looking back, is there a way that rather than wait 2, 3, 4 years to see if that list is representative, if the list is, whatever, is there a way like, even, before that we could know, more about that? Because it seems like some seminal event,
Right.
considering the last event being so huge, but since it happens so rarely, it would be nice to know if they're moving forward on a list that's representative.
I
mean-
think it's very complicated. And I think what happens is you have this exam that's given to 200,000 people. And what happens is, and what's happened on the last exam for sanitation workers, is that if you don't get 100 and over, you don't even get looked at. So if you get a 96, they don't even reach you. Because they don't have that many openings. They might have a few thousand openings and they fill them. And that list has stayed viable for years. That list has been open for years. So what happens though is that once that initial list is established, there are still other requirements and other hurdles that have to be jumped. So that's not the final list. So what happens is as people come off the list, there may be physical requirements. You have to
That's
be able
right,
to show.
I would carry the weight.
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
You can do that?
yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, that is what's captured in the local law 13 report that we will be telegraphing in the future about, you have very good bar graphs that show how many people registered, how many people showed up, how many people registered shows up and take the exam. Those who take the exam, how many pass, those who pass, and how many pass the physical part, So, and we'll get that data maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now. But what I'm saying, I wonder, because it's such a huge, moment, right? So you're taking
But
this
it's
step.
irrelevant,
I wonder how earlier we can get it.
but that's irrelevant.
Why?
Because as Jean just went through, it doesn't make. 1,000 people could have taken the exam. If there are only 100 that are going to get the top part of the exam, the fact that the other people took it is irrelevant. So what are the composition, the only relevant composition is the relevant of the 100 who
I
passed.
wouldn't say irrelevant. I wouldn't say irrelevant.
Top scores.
Yeah, I wouldn't say irrelevant. I say that this is exactly the problem. I mean, somebody somewhere is making a decision that 100%, there's something demonstrably different for the city of New York in terms of its hazards. For someone who gets 100% on an exam and someone who gets 97% on an exam.
But if
it's
it's an issue, it's really the way, it's the basis of civil service, which is in fact,
Yeah, no, I
that it's
understand,
based
but-
only on, quote, merit, the way we
Yeah, no, I
determine merit
understand.
is by the exam.
Yeah, but I don't think it's irrelevant because at the heart of our next report, it's not irrelevant. I think it's very relevant to know the gender, racial, ethnic makeup of not only who register, but who show up, not only of who show up, but who take the exam, not only who take the exam, but who get hundreds. And then from the ones who get hundreds, if there's 50 people who get hundreds, they have an ethnicity, they have a gender, and they may not be hired.
But that's the relevant piece. That's the relevant
I think
piece.
it's all relevant. I think it's all relevant.
I disagree.
And to
That's
pull-
the only
to pull
relevant
out-
piece.
To pull out just the hiring part, you may lose insights into the leaks that happen along the pipeline. And you may lose insight as to where the fall off is, and you may decide that it's really arbitrary too, in terms of, when the list is 70 people, hundreds, and, the 70 people that are hundreds might look different than the 70 people that are 98. And, you know, it may.
But
be very
the setting of the 100 is blind. So the setting, when you start looking at the composition, it loses its ability to be blind, and therefore it is
I
not
don't
civil
think-
service.
That's what I'm sorry, that's what I disagree with the blindness of the process.
Never.
Blindness is always associated with resources.
Yes, never.
So the people with more resources get the better testing because and it could be not their own resources, but throughout society, right? So.
I agree with you.
So
I agree with you.
When-
No, you're perfectly right. But that's not civil service. Civil service is the blind. You're perfectly right. The people with better resources test better. I agree with that.
yeah,
The problem is civil service is based on testing.
Yeah, but.
no, that I agree, but then shouldn't we be questioning these systems that continue to segregate people in incomes? Because what I've seen in my agency is that the difference between the 100 and the 99 when you interview them, some 99 and some 98 and some 97 are better fit for the company than the 100 is. But then I'm forced to offer it to the 100, but the 100 doesn't have the qualifications that I need. I know, but we need to go.
I agree with you completely. We cannot alter civil service.
No, we cannot, but we
We
can
can't.
raise
No,
some concerns.
Again, I go back to, we get this data maybe several years out. I'm saying, I wonder if there's a way where we can put it now.
Well,
The biggest predictor, the reason why it's not blind, is the biggest predictor, the report shows, you know, and sanitation is very interested in this, of who will be hired is who's already hired. So sanitation is like 65% white, 62% white, in a city that's only 32% white, 33% white. And when you look at who gets hired from the last report, who's the incumbent workforce, is mirrors. So it's like, you know, there's 100 people already working. The 60 people who are one of them, so you already know who's going to be the 60 that are going to get hired, right? And friends, family, you know, the exam, here's the date, this is what we can look forward to, you know, that's just social capital. It's you know, it's all of this stuff. So what I'm saying is, if it reproduces the inequities, and we have substantial data to show that, then going forward with an applicant pool that may not be reflected, maybe within the blindness of civil service, right? It's more like a cataract blindness. So this is something that's the heart and soul of some of our future and next report. And I'm just suggesting that maybe if we could just have a peek at the data beforehand. It's akin to like with the Department of Justice. Before certain things go forward, they have to be pre-clear. They want to know that the list that you're hiring off of is not biased, or that
Right.
the lines that you're drawing are not. So it's idea of pre-clearance. I'm no way suggesting that the EEPC under its mandate has like a pre-clearance thing. When people say, oh no, this can't go forward because it's unrepresentative even at the root. You know, so we're not going to get at the root, but I don't think we should get things all the way at the tail end either. So I'm just suggesting that if we were able to just see the data, right? I mean, you're talking, you know, if the last test in 2014 was an indication, you're talking about like, you know, maybe over 200,000 people might take this. Or apply for it at least, or even just apply for it, which shows interest. Doesn't show availability, doesn't show qualification, it shows interest. But then those who pass may show a qualification, may not even availability. So just to get a sense of this
Do you pay for
in real time.
Mhm.
Yeah, you pay.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this is a real good.
That's what
Not that it's
for the
a-
agency.
it's for the DCAS. They administer the tests citywide. In terms of getting data early, we would have to contact DCAS because they are the clearinghouse of all that data of who applies and who ends up getting on the list. The only thing that I could think of that might be applicable that we could ask them for is when you apply to take the test, you have to fill out certain demographics. And that would be information we would get possibly before the list was created, because a list can take up to 2 years to be created, because they have to do it, they have to allow for grading of all the tests, then they have to allow for background, they have to allow for, there's a board where you can contest the questions on the test, the answers to those questions and the validity of those questions. And that has a whole review period where people can come in who took the test, can say, well, you said the answer is A, but I really think it should be B, and this is why. And sometimes the board will take that into account and throw out the question or give everyone the same credit for the question, and that can change
And
scores.
sometimes they don't grade it correctly, and so you have
Yeah,
the
so-
ability to protest the grade.
Yes,
And therefore
that's
have the
why-
ability to have someone look at the grade and determine whether it's not. And we have gotten them at CUNY where we have sent it back saying they misread the experience of this particular
Mhm.
applicant, and they misread the experience of this applicant, and they should indeed be on the list. Because you can protest
yes.
not being on the list.
And I understand that because it's not blind. So I understand that, but in not being blind, what I'm saying is instead of waiting 3-4 years, right? If we're gonna get it.
Oh, it's a CUNY.
Maybe the media might do,
CUNY
a
is
FOIA.
if we
Find
have
out how many-
someone
Excuse me,
who's
can we have-
supposed to be.
Oh, I'm sorry.
maybe the media might even do a FOIL and get it before us, right? What I'm saying is that within the process, that as an EEPC, we get information, see how information is kind of so important for what we do in terms of managing. Can we not get it in 2027, 2028? Is it possible a year from now or 2 years from now? You know.
After they finish grading it.
It really depends on what data we're looking for. If we're looking for applicant data, that's something we probably could get prior to the creation of the list. If we're looking for list data of who is on that list and what are the demographics of the people who make up 100.
Can you define for me when you say B?
So when you go to take a civil service exam, in this case sanitation worker, you apply, so you go to the citywide, testing center, you pay your fee, you fill out all your demographic information, and you take the exam. Sometimes it's a multiple choice exam. In this case, I believe it is. Sometimes it's an education experience exam where basically you certify, I have this education, I have this level of experience. Based upon those two factors, depending upon what kind of test it is, you get points.
Okay.
So if I have 6 years experience versus 10 years experience, 10 years is gonna have a higher point. At the end, they add up the score. Based upon your scores, they put you in list order,
Okay.
and then you hire off the list as you go through.
So that's the list that you're discussing.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, the civil
Yes.
service.
And
Yeah.
one thing I learned too is that, the way the testing works is that there is a testing center. And because sanitation has so many people that are coming to take the test,
Yeah.
they reserve the centers for testing,
Mhm.
that nobody else can get tested because all these sanitation tests are gonna be given. And it goes for a while. It's not like a one shot, you take the test. Everybody takes the test on the same day. That's not what happens. I heard that, sanitation kind of, because they have so many, that they have to reserve the testing center for a long period of time. So it's not like the test is given next week and then that's it.
And I don't know if
You
it's,
asked the question, so I'm,
What was the
I'm
question?
an engineer.
What was the?
She wanted
So
to know
remember,
what
we're
happens with
being WebEx stream, so they may not hear you, maybe
Yeah.
we have to enunciate.
Now, the question was, how does someone protest the grade? And the answer is, I took the test to be an engineer, steam engineer, and I got a grade of 85. In fact, I believe I should have gotten a grade of 95 because you didn't value my experience in the right manner. So that's a protest of an appeal, and either the appeal is granted or not granted.
And the
So-
experience is measured by years or by relevance?
It depends on the title,
Okay.
and it depends on what you're looking for, and then, but that's, again, part of what is indicated. So,
Okay.
as you take the test will say, please list all of your prior experience. Sometimes people don't read and don't list their prior experience, and they send forth an appeal and they say, here I am, I spent 10 years here and 15 years there, and we say, thank you very much. You didn't list it, and that was a requirement, so we don't grant you, we denied your appeal the same way others denied your appeal, because at the time of taking the test, and other people who've taken the test who are being graded listed their experience. You did not, that we cannot now accept that
Thank you.
requirement.
So, you had a comment?
Oh, I was just going to elaborate a little bit more on what Commissioner Reese was saying, in that there's like the two different kinds of, I guess, protest. The protest that I was speaking about was where everybody who took the test can protest the questions on the test and their relevance and the correct answer. Once that's been established, then that answer key goes out, and then you have the opportunity to say, something wasn't counted right, or, and then something wasn't counted right, or my score was miscalculated, or I should have been this level and I've only got that level, or then there's a whole other slew of ways that you can appeal, such as I should have gotten veterans credit because I served and you didn't give me my veterans credit. I did this work prior to working here for DCAS, and I had a civil service examination for a sanitation worker that was appealing his disqualification based upon his character and fitness review, because you have to fill out a whole background check. And if they find out that you've lied on this background check, then that can be a source of disqualification as well. So there's all these different levels that kind of play out to determine who falls where. And at different times you can be kind of chucked off the list. It's also possible because, there's the same group of people doing the background checks. Sanitation worker might not get priority in terms of timing versus, say, a police officer, right? So you may be serving in that title for a period of time, and then you get pulled in for your background investigation, and it turns out, you lied, or there was something there that really you should not have been, appointed in the first place, and you could lose your job. You get kicked off the list. So there's like so many different ways that the list can be narrowed and changed and flowed. Yeah, there's a lot that could happen. God bless you.
Now, this is,
Thank you.
real test case, so with sanitation.
Mhm.
And then I know we have another agenda, so before, but with sanitation, there is documented visceral and real underrepresentation. Some people argue women, others. Right? There may or may not be underutilization. We call off my mind. I don't think the EEPC has identified underutilization. But to the extent that there may be underutilization, and there's 100 people that all have 110 score or 105, and you have to call the first 3, then you could jump to the next 3.
Yep.
To what extent does is there a goal to address underutilization? Like the mantle, so why point out underutilization if there's not a legal requirement or a goal or a compliance requirement to correct it in your biggest next hiring phase?
It's a long-term fix. It's not a short-term fix. So what we normally say is in order to, try to, let's say women were being underutilized, we want to make sure that we have a pool that includes many more women so that, we have better opportunity of getting women at the top of the list.
But by definition, we cannot ensure that, right? Because technically the pool, we won't even know the numbers until 2 years from now. And after the fact.
Hence the recruitment efforts that the DSNY has been undergoing to try to make that pool more inclusive and direct, and people who might not have thought, hey, that could be a good career choice for me, are now being made aware of that opportunity. Whereas maybe in the past, it was word of mouth amongst friends and family. So obviously you're getting very similar demographics in that regard. The recruitment efforts of DSNY made was to try to get that initial pool to be as diverse as possible.
That goes to Commissioner Alcantara's part beforehand, which is the people who take the test have been emboldened to take it. When you go and try to expand the pool, you're going beyond the people who knew about the test and were told about the test and whose family members have been part of the test. And so you try to break that and breach it. But what you're focusing on, Commissioner Bonilla, is the inherent problem with civil service. It is not, it really isn't meritocracy. it is, it's unfortunately inbred knowledge of a particular way to achieve
Of
employment.
course, sure.
And I truly do believe that trying to alter civil service is beyond our capacity in this,
Yeah, no,
in
not
this
altering.
group, but trying to operate around and about it is not. So increasing the knowledge that you need to extend the pool, and you need to go out and tell people that this exam is being given, and tell every high school graduate in this city that this is a good job, it pays well, it's got good retirement benefits. You ought to come up with the $50 or $100 to take the exam. That we can encourage, that we can do something
We can
about.
encourage, but unless we understand more about other utilization and the teeth behind it, it's kind of disingenuous to encourage it in a sense. I can encourage everyone to go to Harvard. And they can pay the application.
No, but you can
But
encourage
I know-
people to
and I
take
know-
this
and I know
exam.
There's been lawsuits around this too, right? Like what is the moral, ethical, and legal consequences of having 200,000 people think they can get a job and pay to get a job that only maybe 300 might get within the next 8 years, 12 years? Like if any other company did that, hey, I want to sell you something, here, apply 300, but so there's also that issue too. And I don't recall the lawsuit that's mostly immediate, but I know that there was people who did that before. I forgot what agency. And like the odds are so insane that, I think they even waived the fees too for particular vulnerable groups and others, because it was almost like they're taking money from the people who need it most. And for a job that they have the probability to get lower than getting into Yale. So there's a real. So I just don't. I'm only speaking for myself, right? Underutilization is a thing. I think it is. I think we have a whole agency established here at the EEPC because we believe it's a thing. Then identifying underutilization occurs. And then when we have the most seminal important moment that could address this in hiring in a significant way, but giving an exam in a significant way, and we don't really have any say, or they don't have a say to us, at least disclose the numbers of that, and then we have to wait 2 or 3 or 4 years later, then that's a real systematic problem in terms of really, because this is like a small needle, right? And sanitation is very interesting because when we release all the titles, sanitation is one of those titles that's kind of nice, right? You don't need a master's of social work. You don't need $90,000 in debt. You don't need maybe even a college degree. You don't need, and you get really good money in relation to where the agency lands, in relation to others. So if there's ever a place to really try to make a difference on utilization.
How many openings do we think there are annually?
For what?
Or sanitation,
I don't,
entry
It's in
worker?
the thousands, it could be, it's a few thousand, I don't remember the exact number, it's in our report though.
But it's 1,000 or something, so
It's more than that,
it's a
it's more like 3,000 something.
that's not a small number.
That's not, no, I was trying to make the least convincing argument to show why we shouldn't be.
Yeah, but that's not a small number. But one of the things,
That's a huge number, which is why
morally,
we ought to be more
one could
active.
say is that a part of whatever announcements and encouragement ought to be, there ought to be disclosure of the actual number of jobs that might be available. We might figure out how to require that.
Sanitation, send a letter, like just showing interest, that the EEPC is interested in this process. And we thank and congratulate them for all the marketing and advertising and all that. The immediate impact is makes a lot of money for the city in a sense. We don't know what's going to happen with the applicants, but we definitely, I think it's significant.
So you want me to reach out to them
Yeah.
for the list, or, because that's a DCAS thing?
yes.
Oh, the DCAS is the one, so they won't even have it. And DCAS
No,
don't need
And that
it.
takes years.
Yeah, it takes years.
That's the
All right.
Well, we
Well,
can
we
get
can
the
think about
green
it.
leaves that says the people that apply.
Or
Because you can compare the people that apply
That's
to
also
the
through
people that
DCAS.
currently have jobs.
maybe email them, right? I don't recall, right? So if
What if we just asked for the ethnicity of those people who applied?
On the gender.
Yeah.
And gender, ethnicity and
If the
gender
last, if the
of
last,
the applicant.
if the last audits tell us something, right? Like we look at the last audit, and then also, is there other utilization that agency? I don't recall, I don't think there is, because even if there's only 4% women, if 2% are available, then they're doing spectacularly well.
That,
No one will believe that.
that analysis for DSNY would come when we do the DSNY audit, which we're not doing this year. We'll get to it sometime in the next 4 years. I don't remember which year they're on the audit plan for, but during that audit, we do look at the SEEDS reports that they've been provided to show underutilization. And if we see that they have underutilization identified in a particular job title, we ask them to show their recruitment efforts, their selection efforts, and how those things were changed or affected or impacted to try to eliminate the underutilization that was identified.
But what if we go back and look at the last time we audited
Yeah.
that?
Actually, yeah.
You know, we should-
What-
Why don't we just do that, see what's
And so that we're not,
Well,
so that we're not signaling out sanitation. Our next report, I think, focuses on 7 agencies. 5. Those agencies may or may not have seen the chapters of the next report for them. Let's schedule time to meet with them and share the report with them. That way they could get a sense of, I'm sure they know it already, but so from our point of view, we can show them who's taking exams, promotions, who's dropped out, who hasn't, what the pay, how they look in relation to others, what the composition of the workforce is, things like that. I think that'd be a vital thought. Because then it helps us come to the Department of Corrections, I believe, is included.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's a good way to get everything else.
Well, it's funny you should say that too, because I do want to give them a heads up on the report before it goes out, because they are in the report. I don't want them to be.
So maybe this is our way to just give them heads up and just talk about it.
Sure. So at the next meeting, would you like us to have?
I mean, we email them now. I don't know when the report's gonna be released, but I don't think, they're not gonna, they're not gonna have veto over the report, obviously, but, before it gets released or tandem when it gets released, we should probably schedule one-on-ones.
What are we up to, 5A?
Yes, 5A. Preliminary, audit update, preliminary determinations. I think this is, Jennifer Shaw.
Yes, I have a very quick update for you. We are working on the preliminary determinations. We expected to have more audits completed by this time, but we were down one manager who has returned from leave, so we're hoping the backlog of work will kind of start to flow. And we are losing one of our analysts at the end of this week, so we're gonna be down another analyst.
Oh dear.
So we can do some hiring, but, and this is the first year of a new audit. So we're kind of going through all of the what ifs and what about this kind of question as we're drafting these preliminaries. I'm hoping that by the next meeting, we'll have some finals for you. That's my goal. I do think that we'll still be able to,
Your number.
I think we'll be able to make our numbers. I do, because there's a significant amount of audits that are going to be initiated in the fall for the community boards and the follow-ups. And those are generally smaller, shorter audits. So really our team is focusing on getting these bigger agencies kind of the audit complete and get them into compliance monitoring so that we can help them fix any kind of deficiencies. And then they'll simultaneously do the community board audits, which take a little bit less time, so. We're not gonna have powerhouse numbers like we did last year, but I'm pretty sure we'll make our numbers.
Okay.
Which also means that, because we're in July now, that's up tomorrow. We'd like to start doing the information sessions for the next group of people that will be, group of agencies rather, that will be audited. And start to prepare for those audits.
Yes, I've already started drafting some standards. We have to kind of iron out some more issues of how and the specifics and the logistics, and then once we finalize that, we can present it to the board for your approval.
Any questions on preliminary determination? Section 6, research update. Subsection A, local law 13, report status update.
Right, so we just alluded to the fact that we are continuing to work on the local law 13 report. It is nearly finalized. There's just a few more things that have to be done. And now that we're going to be inviting agencies in for one-on-one, we'll be doing that simultaneously with getting it out to you.
B, public hearing status update.
So I think we kind of talked about that already.
Oh, is that the symposium?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, the public hearing threw me off. It wasn't, I'm sorry for jumping the order of the agenda. I got thrown off when it said public hearing, I didn't think symposium.
No problem.
Okay, so then we move on to a motion to exit public session and go into executive session for the purposes of discussing personnel updates. We have a motion.
I so move.
Commissioner Reese motions. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Alcantara seconds. All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll now exit into executive session and we'll stop the recording of the proceedings on WebEx.